go again, everyone. This week I've got such a treat for you. We're going to be chatting to my dear friend Sam Wortelhock, who is the most incredible artist. She is also a woman who has single-handedly painted murals in practically every school and community in Australia, I kid you not. And it's my absolute pleasure to share her with you today.
Let's start.
I've started. Okay.
Brilliant.
Listen, I can't believe it. My computer's just literally just come up with, sorry, Sam, I've just got
That's
something
okay.
up here. Okay. All right. We're back in the room. Here I am. Welcome. It's so lovely to introduce you all today, and I need to get into gallery view as well. There we go. I need to introduce you all today to my dear friend and artist, Sam Wortelhock.
Hi, everybody.
And we're both mother of boys, so enough said on that. And if there's any background noise from dogs or children, it's part of our life.
It is. It
It's
is.
part of our life, and it's just the way it is with
It
everybody at
is.
the moment. So, Sam, the reason I wanted to chat to you today, honey, is because I really want to talk about the incredible work that you have put out in the Northern Rivers and beyond in Australia. In Australia, really, you've not gone international, but you've gone pretty much all over Australia, creating the most incredible murals, which from my perspective have the story of the people who live there woven in, the history of the area woven in, but more beautifully the country and the animals and the beasties and the, as we say in Scotland, and the insects, and just everything is there. So they're so alive with biodiversity. And I just wanted to ask you, because I know you didn't originally start out doing murals. You started in sort of smaller, more fine arty type things, but they were always quite interesting and very different. And you always had this very deep Aboriginal connection. Just want you to just talk about the process and how you came into doing these incredible murals.
Yeah, sure. Look, I'm completely untrained as an artist, so I never had formal training, and even though imagery always mattered to me, I never thought that it would ever come from me. And the biggest catalyst was watching David Attenborough as a child, because I was completely captivated as a young girl in England by his Life on Earth series, and especially the segments that he did in Australia. And so I felt this incredible affinity with the Aboriginal culture. And a boyfriend and I came to Australia, and we stayed above a gallery in Queen Street, Wallara, and it was a naive art gallery. And it was in that moment that I realized that you didn't need formal training to be an artist. And because from a little girl, I used to work with my dreams. My dreams were my richest part, was just as valid as my waking life. And I'd sit at the breakfast table, and each morning I would share my dreams. And I was really lucky that I didn't have a mum who said, just shut up, because, I'd be like, it's happening. And so when it came to that time in my early 20s, when I'd been inside this gallery, and I was really experimenting with my dreams at the time, and also wondering where on earth the Aboriginal people were, because all I could see was a lot of white people, a lot of sexism, and a lot of racism. This was actually, I arrived in the year of bicentenary, which is kind of apt. So I did a lot of traveling, kept experimenting with my dreams, got back to London because it was a short trip around the world. And I woke up on my birthday, and I had this incredibly strong compulsion to buy myself paints. Went down to Covent Garden, bought myself paints, set them out for the next day, and that night I asked for a painting to appear in my dreams. And what appeared in my dreams was a painting of mine called Balance. And Balance is like none of my other paintings. It's like a blueprint for the collection. And in center space, it's like a tier of 5. And it's about from the, the top section, you see the top of mountains and the sky. And then you see the trees with birds in it. And in the center, you see this strip of Aboriginal rock art, which I would never paint today, but back then that's what my dreams showed me. And then beneath there is can't remember, but then and the bottom is this, the under the ocean. So it is the tiers of a cross section of life. Oh, and in the middle, no, the rock art's on. In the middle are these people who are holding it up like they are doing star jumps. And they are holding the balance. They are holding the elements. And I remember painting this thing and thinking, this is the start of something. And I was so naive. There was no sense of any commercial expectation of the work from its inception. But there was also, absolutely crucially, no sense that this belonged to me or that it came from me. This came from my intention going out there and something responding to that intention.
Yeah.
And so when we decided to move back to Australia, by that time I had painted quite a lot of paintings, and this particular gallery said, we want to give you an exhibition. And that's really how it started. And then I married the person from the gallery. Yeah. That's a whole other story. And we started this collection of paintings that were always about giving voice to the natural world, and also allowing, through the message and through a lot of humor, for people who weren't connected to Indigenous interests to become curious.
Yeah.
So, for example, one of the best paintings to illustrate that would be My Last Supper, where center stage you have an Aboriginal elder sitting at the table with the backdrop of Uluru, and the disciples are individual last animals, so the last snow leopard, the last orangutan, and they're sitting around this table because monoculture has taken over their biodiversity, and so they're eating McDonald's. And that painting sold for $60,000.
Wow. Wow.
Eventually, I'm sort of leaping here, but it was never, ever, ever a case that people bought our paintings for the value of them in terms of the financial value. Yeah. It was the story that held the power and the potential.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting that you say that, because I mean, I've known you for many years, and it's the first time that I'm hearing that your connection is actually really ultimately with the natural world and what and the voice it's wanting to say, rather than the Aboriginal culture. The Aboriginal culture is probably still in touch with that voice, still practices that voice, as do many other cultures around the world and a lot of people. But it's interesting that the core message came really from the nature, from nature.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, Sam. I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely. From nature, and also from,
Makes complete sense now.
Yes, yeah. I mean, from nature, but I would also say, that intention connected me, and I don't mean to sound too esoteric, because I really don't, go into it. But I have no doubt, and I'll give you a perfect example if this is appropriate, but when I started doing my paintings, I also started to volunteer my time in schools. And I did that because children connected to the art. It was naive in style. It didn't make them feel like it wasn't something they could one day do. And the storytelling was massive. And you know, I would go into schools, take a painting in, do the story, and I would always end with a meditation. And I would take the children to a place that I would go to once I replaced asking my dreams, putting pressure on my own dreams. I would go to this place where I would walk through this pathway through a rainforest. And it was a creative visualization. And I would see this beam of light at the end of this pathway. So I would know in my heart that there was a clearing coming up, with the anticipation of what was in that clearing. And in the clearing was a waterfall. And it was a waterfall of light. And I would go and you know, the children would come with me in the creative vision. We would stand underneath this light that wouldn't flow over us. It would go through our heads and out of our feet. And then I would sit on this mossy bank. It's all sounding very cliched at this point. On this mossy bank, looking into this pool, and now especially cliche because it's encrusted with crystals, isn't it? And I would sit, and each time I would go there very vividly, the water hole would have a different colored crystal. Now, if it was red, if it was green, it meant I had to rest. But if it was red, it meant there's a painting at the bottom of the pool. So I'd jump in. Yeah. And this is when all your guests are now going to think, who is this mad woman? Anyway, I'd go to the bottom, and that's where most of my paintings, I'd see this painting. Well, anyway, one day, years after painting many paintings, I actually went to this place in a dream. So I'd had many kids do their paintings from this place. Yeah. This was like my special place. And in this dream, I remember thinking, this place actually exists, because the dream was so vivid. And it's such an important story, because I went through the ritual standing under the waterfall, sitting on the rock, looking down in my pond. And then I suddenly saw, coming out of the skirting trees around this clearing, this incredibly big figure. And I can only kind of describe it like a pylon that you see that transmits electricity, this enormous sort of scaffolding like built woman. Wow. Definitely female, and absolutely full of love. I just remember being overwhelmed with a sense of unconditional love. And she slowly made her way to me, and she beckoned me into the forest that skirted the clearing. And I followed her in, and she slowly, because she's so big, she slowly bent down and started to uncover the leaf litter on the ground to reveal, another cliche, a treasure box. And she opened the lid, and in there were the crystals. And she was saying to me that I am the one that gives you the paintings. And she was an Aboriginal Mimi spirit. So while I might be a white artist, she ain't.
Okay. So much. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I know those Mimi spirits because I've got some galing-galings in my house from Uncle Bill Harney, who I know you know. And that he painted, and they're little mischievous wee spirit things. I don't know what the Mimi spirits are, but my galing-galings are quite mischievous. So I know exactly what you mean. Wow, Sam. Okay.
Yeah.
That is huge. So, sorry, have you finished that?
Yes.
Oh, you have? Because I was going to ask you, so how did you then move into murals? How did that transition happen?
Yeah, now of course the printer's going off as I speak.
Of course it is.
That's okay. My son's doing his Zoom, his horticulture Zoom. Yeah. Is it okay?
Yes. Keep going.
Okay, that's good. As long as you can still hear me. Okay, well, what happened was as I was taking my paintings into schools, and I remember one particular case, a week after 9/11, and I took my painting, The Human Race,
Mhm.
into this school in Rosebank, actually. And I spoke to the children about fear. And as is my practice, is nothing is planned. My children are a result of me not being able to make plans. So I'm not going to plan a painting. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not going to plan at all. I'm not planning this. You know,
Yeah.
what is coming out now is coming out
Yeah.
in its own little order. Um, and so I'm in this classroom talking about fear. And I haven't experienced much fear, certainly up until this point in my life. So, you know, I was kind of talking a bit out of my arse, if I can speak like that, because I didn't have the experience to really back up what I was saying.
Yeah.
But the painting had its own story around fear, and that was what I was communicating. So the little boy at the back of the class, who had his head in his hands, I assumed, because this is a hippie era, era and area, that he had, you know, I had this assumption that his parents did the markets and he'd been up all night because it was Monday and he hadn't slept and blah. So I finished my talk and the principal came up to me and he said, Sam, everything you said today was for that little boy at the back of the class.
Wow.
And then he proceeded to unpack this boy's life.
Oh.
And he said, everything that is unimaginable that could happen to a child happens to him.
Oh.
And anyway, I won't sort of really go into more detail there, but I drove home thinking, I carry an enormous responsibility with this work.
Yeah.
And I don't even know that responsibility. Until today, I didn't know what that responsibility actually was, or the gravity of it.
Yeah.
And anyway, it really played heavily on my heart. And anyway, a school holiday was coming up, and oh, that's right. He said to me, this is the last year of this boy's schooling in primary school.
Mm.
And he said, I feel like we've won his trust in the 2 years that he's been here.
Mm.
But I'm telling you now, he said, what you said today makes me feel more confident that this next stage in education is going to be better. Yeah. And so it was the summer holidays when he phoned me and he said, Sam, the boy that we talked about has been in touch with me. And he said he asked me to meet him. So I could get emotional at this point. And he asked me to meet him. So we met, and he has done a painting. And he has documented every trauma that has happened in his life. And he said, and now I feel like I can let him go. And then, so that was one story, but there were a few like that. There was one boy who had autism.
So you gave him, just stopping there, you gave him a permission slip to express himself through the same medium that you were role modeling to them. And he used that to heal his trauma, much like the Aboriginal people do. They all do artwork. So, wow, that's really powerful, Sam.
And that got the education department in touch with me. Not just that incident, but there was a little boy at Ocean Shores School who was in the special unit, whose father was an artist, and he was so overwhelmed by the extrasensory experience of color that he would have a little bucket of water and a brush, and he would go to a tree and he would paint the leaf with water. He couldn't deal with color, but he could work with water. And Ocean Shore School had asked me to paint this underwater scene of a reef and have extrasensory elements in the mural. Yeah. And he would watch me. I remember his dad's an artist, so he could watch his dad as well. And then one day he sat next to me. He didn't speak.
Okay.
He couldn't speak. And I just looked at him and I said, would you like to paint some blobs? Didn't use the word paint. And he picked up my brush and he painted the finest coral imaginable. And so, yes, so what the work was doing, it was unlocking stuff. It was unlocking stuff. So that's when the department said to me, there's something about your work that's having an effect. on our students that we can't do ourselves. Can you become formally trained so that we can have you in our space more? So I did this really kind of like unrelated thing. I went to TAFE and I did what was it?
I know the tertiary four.
The thing. I can't remember what it's called.
Education, which is, you know, what was it? It is a tertiary.
This is it. That's why it's so relevant.
How to become a teacher of something that you do. Is that right?
It was training and assessment. It was so not me. It was so not me. It was all about planning and all sorts of things. Yes. Unrelated. But anyway, it gave me the ticket.
Yes.
And then, and so I started to paint murals in schools because, you know, I felt like, first of all, I'd done really well with my private art, but my marriage had mental health issues involved with it, and we had to leave that behind. But I had the responsibility of my family, and the GFC was kind of, it was all, everything was kind of contrived to put me in a position of becoming even more less about me and more about the greater good. And so it was a natural segue for me to start painting in schools and transforming the learning environment. And so I would go into a school and I'd say to the principal, what do you need this mural to do? And a principal might say, oh, the children need to calm down, or we need to have more enrollments, or respect for self-environment, whatever it was. And I would go to that space that I've always gone to, and bingo, there would be, you know, there would be the image.
Yeah.
And if you'd like me to give you an example of that, would you like me to give you, it's only a little one, okay? So I was asked to, and you know that I'm a bit of a sinner, right? Well, I was asked to do a religious school and a Seventh-day Adventist school. And, you know, because I don't plan anything and I'm so kind of open to suggestions. Sorry about the printer, by the way.
I didn't hear it.
That's good, I can. The principal said to me when I asked him the open question of what do you need this mural to do, instead of opening it up, he shut it down because he said, I don't want anything secular. He put rules in place. I don't want any witches or elves or anything like that. And I said, okay. And of course, immediately all I can see is elves, witches, and secular things. So I went to the wall because I had 10 minutes to work this out. And so I went to the blank wall that had been pre-whitewashed. And I said, what do you want me to paint? And I went inside, closed my eyes. And the mural, this particular one, I was working with Safe on social media. So they go in and they talk about cyber safety to school. So it had to be about that subject. Yeah. And as I'm doing my going inside thing, I immediately see the apple tree and little Adam and little Eve. And little Eve is tempting little Adam with an Apple iPhone. And I thought, I hope that's not secular, because you know what? I love it. You know, I love it. It's all about me, really. You know, I love this idea. And I had on the tree that the serpent was the charger, because that was giving it power. Yes. Anyway, and it was all of this thing. And I remember the principal was really, really delighted with it.
Oh, fantastic.
And he said, where did that idea come from? And I said to him, it came from the wall. And he said, no, it didn't. It came from, what would he call God? It came from anyway, he used a word that meant God.
Almighty, or not?
Yes, something like that.
Not the divine,
Holy Spirit. He said the Holy Spirit.
The Holy Spirit.
The actual Holy Spirit
came through.
And I said, yeah, and I said to him, I've got to tell you about a dream that I had when I was really small. And this is relevant because it goes back to that time when I used to talk about my dreams around the kitchen table, okay?
Yeah.
And I said, you know, it's a really short dream where I'm sitting at the table with my brother and my dad, and my mum is in the kitchen making toast in the background. And I am, in this evangelical way, talking to my dad and my brother about how there's God in everything, and being really self-righteous about the fact that, Dad, if you slam your mug on the table, the mug is feeling that because there's God in it. You know, and I'm having this kind of really this really kind of weird conversation, but I'm being totally passionate. And in the background, I'm irritated by the fact that my mother is making toast and not listening to me. And then I see her pick up this bit of toast and she's poking it, you know. And then she comes over in this quite serene way and she hands a piece of toast to my dad and she says, God the Father. And then she hands a piece of toast to my brother and she says, God the Son. And then the one she's poked, she hands to me and she says, and God the Holy Toast. And I just said that there's, you know, so, and the reason I'm sharing that is that there's this guy who's, you know, been so kind of, and I'm so,
Yeah.
and yet in that moment of absolute, this is your worldview and this is mine.
You created.
We are now friends.
Yeah.
We are friends. There is a difference and there's no right or wrong.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think, you know, it also speaks to the biodiversity of which really your work comes from, Sam. And it makes complete sense that by making it accessible, it makes it more, it means that you and the beauty of who you are can be accessible to everybody, because you're not pigeonholing yourself into a monoculture of being, you know, an artist and I have to have, you know, it this way. You're saying I can express this in whichever way it needs to come out, and however it needs to be colored and seen, it's fine, because it still works. It still works. God is in everything.
Yeah, it's this hilarious, and it's playful. And it's playful, you know, it's playful, and there is that thing that nature is our greatest teacher, and you know, that is my guiding force. That is what I, you know, there is this deep need, I suppose. For me, my priorities would be to restore the natural world into the visual experience of children, but also it's to remind them that we live on the land of the oldest, you know, living culture on earth, and that deserves respect. And you were the one that said to me and taught me through what you've learned that until we own that story, we cannot change the ending. And so, you know, there is no better place to have that conversation and that education than in schools, where, you know, the learning environment can honor that.
Absolutely. And you know, often it's really interesting. I'm quite interested to hear what you think when you go in to schools, because you know, sometimes that story can be really uncomfortable. I know from my own personal experience. I mean, people who watching this probably don't know that I've got a Master's of Indigenous Studies. I came here to study with the Aboriginal people, and that really came from my wiring from Africa, growing up as a child in West Africa. It also happens that Sam was born in East Africa, in Kenya, and although she didn't spend a great deal of time there, she was born there, and we do have an African connection between us. And I wonder whether that has given us easier access to our Indigenous soul, and which has made us more able to relate to the Indigenous story and be more open-minded. But I'm interested how you bring those narratives into environments, much like you were talking about with that teacher, where you bring them into an environment where, you know, there is that very white privileged, and you know that the narrative here has been quite shaming. I know for a lot of white Australia, they have really struggled with some of the horrific acts of violence that they have perpetrated, their ancestors have perpetrated on the Aboriginal people. And that shame has really stopped them coming together in reconciliation, because you've got the Aboriginal people who are still dealing with the wounds from that colonization, and you've got the white Australians who feel so much shame. How do you reconcile that in your artwork, Sam?
Well, first of all, I know what belongs to me and what doesn't belong to me.
Okay.
So there is nothing that I would do that even looks like Aboriginal art. That's absolutely a given. For me, it is about honouring the people pre-European settlement, and the fact that they treated this land with such dignity, and the fact that their example is more powerful than anything that I could possibly do to interpret that. So the most recent example was Detton Public School. It's an Aboriginal school near Lake Mungo. Lake Mungo is where the oldest remains. There was male and female remains, right. And that's what gave proof that 60,000 years plus is how long this culture has been living on this land. And that it's that relationship, that custodial relationship that I try to paint. And this was an interesting example because, again, I have to bring religion into it, because this clan near Mildura, Detton, had been on a mission. So the children that I was working with to paint their mural in their school had the kink in their DNA was very much there, the indoctrination. Why are you so interested in this? And she says it in this really stern way. And I said, I am in awe of the fact that we are standing on 20 generations of your ancestors. That's remarkable. And she said, well, it means nothing to me. Wow. Because only one person created this, and that was God. Huge. Wow. And then we sat on the bus on the way home, and there was another little girl who had used my art materials on the way in there, very ADHD. Listening to the elders, how did it make you feel? And she said to me, it makes me feel like my country is a better place. Oh. This is a girl who's being brought up by her 70-year-old grandparents because her mother died of an overdose. Oh. Her father is still in that trap. This is a girl who, had a beautiful lunchbox. So she's being well looked after. She did not go hungry. Mm-hmm. But you can tell by her behavior that she craves attention because she probably doesn't get a lot of it. No, sure. And it was just like, my country is a better place. So what I did is that we went back to Detton and I painted Lake Mungo as it was, this pristine lake with abundance, families. It's interesting with COVID, probably living a bit like, not living a bit like we are now, but, the teaching was about the foraging. The teaching was about the communication. The teaching was about the one in all in. The teaching was about cooperation. Mm-hmm. And the ultimate teacher is the mother. Yeah. Because they're completely dependent on her for their survival. Yeah. And so that's what's on their wall now. And the principal contacted me last week and he said, because it is actually one of the most violent schools in Australia. Wow. And I saw a lot of that in the class, in the playground. And he said, Sam, I've got to tell you, there was one boy and he was hitting the mural. And he said, I called out my window, so-and-so, don't you hit the mural. And he said, he came into my office and says, please don't tell Sam. Please don't tell Sam.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
And so there is all I can do is plant that seed with the things that I have to be able to do that, and then walk away.
Yeah.
knowing that that is there for
Yeah.
as long as it exists. And I'm powerless over what it does and how it behaves and how,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think they have the potential, obviously, they have a life of their own. You give them, it's almost like you birth them, Sam, and then they have a life of them, their own. And it's like, you know, it's like mothers and children. It's like, you know, you have to cut the cord and go, okay, this was the gift I gave you, and you have to walk away and let it find out for itself how it's going to teach the children and the subsequent generations, what people take away from it, how they interpret it. You know, I was having a
Mm,
conversation with my daughter, our artistic one, as you know, and the other day, and she was talking about, Mum, don't interpret art for people, let people interpret it themselves. Because I was talking
yes,
about some collage work I was doing, and I was going, oh, somebody's asked me, and she said, don't tell people what it means, Mum. Just shut
yeah,
up. Honestly, they don't want to hear. Let people work it out for themselves. They'll take away what they need from it. And
mm,
so that's a beautiful thing, to be able to, as an artist, just go, you know what? It's, I've birthed
yeah,
it. That's it. It has a life of
yeah.
its own now. But what incredibly powerful work, Sam. And my God, you have brightened up this community, because everywhere I drive, I see, oh, there she is. There, everywhere. She's been every school in the Shire seems to have one of your beautiful murals. I would love to talk to you all day. Um, are there any other little tidbits or things about work that you're doing now? Are you still doing murals? Are you moving on to different things? I'd love to just hear that.
Yeah, look, do you know, in this time of COVID, I've got only one mural booked. So my neighbour asked me to paint their post box, and I did. And now I'm going to be busy all weekend painting post boxes. Not, you know, and what I'm doing with them is I'm putting big parrots on them, or bees, and you know, again, you know, taking a very boring, seriously boring
Yeah,
thing, and giving it life. But I suppose, you know, the biggest thing that I'd like to leave in saying is that I think it's really important. Well, for me, my practice, it's really important that it's not about me.
yeah,
It's really important that I never sign my paintings my name. I sign it Breakaway Art, which is, you know, the entity that does all of it.
yeah,
Um, uh, but I think, you know, I say to children, when you are painting, this is the only lesson, and I say don't tell your teachers, this is the only lesson where I recommend you leave your brain outside the door.
yeah,
You be playful and you trust what is coming through your arm. You actually give authority to your oversoul, your big Sam, your big Jen, your big
yeah,
Callie, your big whatever, to do the work for you.
yeah,
And you are not here about you, you are here to be of service.
yeah.
Yeah.
The channel, the channel for the whatever it is that needs to come through. And for me, that's very much that, just that coming from this place rather from this logical brain. Um,
Yes.
and just allowing whatever needs to come out, however it looks like, whatever it needs to say, allowing it to
Yes.
come out from here.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you so much for taking
Thank you.
time out of your day to
I
share.
bet the printer will.
Yeah, with the printer, who had just had few
I
words
bet
to
the printer
say.
will stop.
Few words to say. The dogs didn't know. I'm surprised the dogs didn't come in and have something to say. Oh,
Good as gold for the first time ever.
I love that, Sam. I love that. Look at them. Oh, God bless them.
I
Thank you
know.
so much, my darling.
Thank you,
Um,
Jen.
I love you endlessly.
Me too.